In the deepest corners of the world, there are places no light reaches. Places carved from silence, where the air itself feels alive. Tonight, we are following the story of a cave diver, a man trained to face the dark, who discovered that some darkness breathes back. This is not a ghost story. It's not a legend. It's a testimony. Welcome to NightLore. I've been a cave rescue diver for more than a decade now. When people hear that, they picture something out of a documentary. Bright lights, slow motion footage, divers moving gracefully through crystal clear water, all serene and beautiful. It's not like that. Not even close. What it's really like is crawling through a stone throat that's barely wide enough for your body. The rock scrapes your shoulders until you bleed. Your tank bangs against the ceiling with every breath. The water is cold enough to numb thought. And when your light flickers out, there's nothing. No up, no down, no hands in front of your face. Just a blackness, so thick it feels alive. That's the part people don't understand. The dark down there isn't just the absence of light. It's pressure. It presses against your mask, your lungs, your heartbeat. It gets inside your head until you start thinking maybe it's better if you just stop moving. But we go in anyway. Because sometimes people don't come back. I've seen the kind of panic that makes grown men claw at their own masks. I've had them rip their regulators out mid-rescue, convinced they're drowning even with a full tank. I've pulled blue-lipped bodies out of cracks so tight we had to peel their skin off the stone to free them. You learn not to think too much. Not about the dark or the screams or the fact that when a diver gets stuck for too long, you can tell exactly when they stop fighting. That's my job, to go where no sane person wants to go. But all the fear, all the bodies, all the tight tunnels and failed rescues, none of it prepared me for what happened last winter. We call it the breathing cave now, those of us who were there. But I know what it really is. And I wish to God I'd never gone in. It was just after midnight when my phone rang. Emergency dispatch. A group of amateur divers had gone missing in a limestone cave system about 30 miles outside town. That cave already had a reputation. Locals whispered about it, said it moved you around. Some claimed you could swim in circles for hours and surface in a place that didn't exist on any map. I'd written that off as folklore. Every region has one of those stories, a lake that swallows boats, a canyon that eats echoes. But this one felt different. When I got to the site, the rangers were waiting near the entrance, standing in a half circle of floodlights that made the snow glow blue. Their faces told me everything before a word was spoken. They'd already written the divers off as dead. One of them, a grizzled man with eyes like chipped glass, told me the cave was breathing. I thought he was talking about the usual air shifts you get in tight spaces, but he shook his head. He said the current moved in and out like a tide, like the cave itself was inhaling. The sonar logs backed it up. Every 47 seconds, a pressure fluctuation rolled through the water. Nothing fed it. No rivers, no vents, just a pulse. That was the first thing that made my stomach twist. The second was the recording. They'd patched through the last distress transmission from the missing group. Static muffled by stone and water, but under it, you could hear them screaming. 3 voices gasping, begging, and then a fourth one cut through clear and frantic, "Don't bring it back out with you." That was it. Silence after. We all stared at the speakers like we expected another voice to answer. Nobody said a word. Even now I can still hear that sentence looping in my head. Not just the words, but the tone, the way they said it. It wasn't panic, it was warning. At the time, we told ourselves they were delirious. Decompression, hypothermia, oxygen loss. But standing there at the cave mouth, listening to the wind push through the entrance like a sigh, I couldn't shake the feeling that the ranger was right. The cave was breathing, and whatever it exhaled wasn't human. The air around the entrance was sharp with cold, the kind that bites through your gloves and turns your breath into steam. Floodlights threw harsh white against the limestone walls, but beyond that, just blackness, an open mouth waiting to swallow us whole. Our crew was smaller than usual that night. That's how it always goes when the job is bad. Less people, less panic, just 3 of us. Commander Harris led the dive. He'd been doing this longer than I'd been alive. A former military diver, broad-shouldered calm to the point of unnerving. The kind of man who could look death in the face and still ask for a checklist. If he ever felt fear, he buried it deep where no one could see. Then there was Leon, young, skilled, but green when it came to rescue operations. He'd logged plenty of recreational dives, but that's child's play compared to this. Cave diving doesn't forgive mistakes. He kept adjusting his gear, rechecking straps, fidgeting with his regulator. I could tell he was trying to mask his nerves, but his eyes gave him away. I was the point diver, first in, last out. My job was to lead the descent, mark the path, and keep the guideline taut. The lifeline between the world above and whatever waited below. We did the final checks under the floodlights, radios synced, oxygen levels green, tether lines secured. The medics stood nearby, pretending not to stare. Everyone avoids making eye contact right before a dive like this. It's bad luck, or maybe no one wants to imagine they might be the last face you see. Harris gathered us in close. His voice was steady over the wind. Stay on the line. Stay with your partner. If visibility drops, you stop. You don't move blind. You lose the guideline, you call it, and we regroup. No heroes, no mistakes. Leon nodded too fast. I just gave a thumbs up. We slipped into the water one at a time. The world above fell away in an instant. Cold, silence, the muffled rasp of my own breath. That first second underwater always feels like dying. The sound of your breathing becomes everything. The hiss, the exhale, the heartbeat echoing in your ears. The light fades to green, then gray, then black. The guideline shimmered faintly in my beam, stretching forward into the dark. We moved single file. Me first, Leon behind Harris at the rear. Each kick measured, each motion deliberate. The rock walls tightened around us until I could feel the stone brushing my shoulders. My tank scraped against the ceiling with a hollow metallic ring. Every clang was a reminder there's no room for error down here. At 40 meters in, the tunnel began to narrow. The limestone pressed inward until I had to turn sideways to fit. My body slid forward, inch by inch, belly scraping stone, one hand pulling the line, the other pushing through darkness so thick it felt solid. I slowed my breathing. One long inhale, one long exhale. The worst thing you can do in a squeeze is panic. Panic eats air. Panic kills. Behind me, Leon's light flickered as he tried to follow my path. I heard the faint clink of his tank hitting the ceiling, then his voice, over comms, tight-strained. Jesus, this is narrow. Keep moving, Harris replied. You'll clear it in 5 meters. I wanted to tell him that 5 meters can feel like 5 miles when you're trapped between rock and water. The squeeze opened up suddenly, into a wider chamber, a pocket of stillness after the crawl. I drifted up, grateful for the space, and swept my light across the walls. The rock glistened wetly, veins of quartz catching the beam. I caught sight of something else, too deep. Scratches carved into the limestone, long and curved like claw marks. They looked deliberate, fresh. For a moment, I told myself it was from old dive gear. Maybe a tank valve scraping during another rescue. But they were too deep, too precise. I reached out, brushing one with my gloved hand. The stone was smooth, unnaturally polished at the edges, as if something had been dragged hard against it. Then the comms crackled in my ear. Harris's voice came through low and clear. "Keep your head, kid. Caves like to play tricks on your eyes." Maybe he was right. But when I pulled my hand back, the groove in the rock looked almost curved around my fingers, like it wanted to close. I didn't say a word. I just tightened my grip on the guideline and kept moving forward to the dark. The tunnel tightened again, the stone pressing close enough that I could feel the vibrations of my own pulse through the rock. Every movement was measured now, slow, deliberate. My body sliding through the throat of the cave like a bullet in a barrel. The guideline thrummed faintly in my glove. I followed it deeper, my light cutting through the water in thin, shaky beams that dissolved before they reached the walls. The silence was suffocating. Only the soft hiss of my regulator reminded me I was still breathing. Then the squeeze got worse. The ceiling dropped, forcing me to flatten against the limestone arms pinned at my sides. My tank scraped once, twice, until the sound of metal on rock made my teeth ache. My fin caught on something behind me and held fast. I tugged gently. It didn't move. The first jolt of panic hit me like electricity. My heart kicked against my ribs, breath quickening before I could stop it. Bubbles exploded from my mask, clouding the water with silver. No room to turn, no way to look back. If I got stuck here, I'd die here. I forced myself to exhale, shrinking my chest just enough to twist my hips. The fin tore free with a sharp jerk, and I scraped forward, dragging skin against stone. The movement stirred up silt. My light vanished. Instantly the world collapsed into blackness, total absolute. I couldn't tell if I was moving forward or just floating in place. Then something brushed against me. It was light, almost gentle, a smooth drag across my shoulder. At first, I thought it was Leon catching up his glove, brushing my suit. But Leon was still 30 feet behind me, and whatever touched me came from ahead. I froze. The water shifted a subtle pull that didn't match the cave's rhythm. For a second, it felt like the entire tunnel had exhaled. Then, just as suddenly, the pressure eased. My hand found the guideline again, and I pushed forward with a slow, shuddering kick. The tunnel spat me out into open space. I broke through into a chamber large enough to stand in if I'd been above water. The relief hit me so hard, I nearly sobbed into my mask. The ceiling arched high overhead, the water still and heavy, catching my light in dull reflections. I waved my beam across the walls, tracing the veins of stone. That's when I saw the marks gouged deep into the rock, long and curved like claws, dragged across wet clay. They weren't random. They formed arcs patterns that spiraled in on themselves. I ran my glove across one. The stone felt strange, not rough, like limestone, but smooth, almost oily. My comms crackled. Harris's voice came through, low, distorted by the water. "You're clear, yeah," I said. My voice sounded distant, like someone else was speaking. "There's something down here. The walls are carved up." There was a pause. Carved scratched. I corrected. Fresh. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his tone was clipped. Copy. Stay on task. Don't lose the line. I wanted to ask if he'd ever seen anything like it before. But I didn't. Because I already knew his answer. Something about the chamber felt wrong. The air pocket above shimmered faintly in my light, like heat rising from pavement. I couldn't hear it, but I could feel it, an almost imperceptible vibration that thrummed through the water, steady and rhythmic. A pulse. I turned toward the far wall and saw the gouges again, deeper now, angling downward, as if something massive had dragged its weight through the tunnel ahead. Leon's voice cut through the comms, shaky. You hear that? Hear what I whispered, though. Whispering underwater made no sense. Knocking. And then I heard it too. 3 sharp taps, hollow, distant. Knock, knock, knock. Not the random shift of falling rock, not the crackle of pressure settling. It was deliberate, measured, like something answering us from deeper inside. My chest went tight. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but the line pulled forward, taut and unyielding, disappearing into the dark. I looked at it for a long time, bubbles rising from my mask, like a slow shaking breath. Then I tightened my grip and followed it in. The knocking didn't stop. It came in irregular bursts now, sometimes 3 beats, sometimes 2, always distant, always from the dark ahead. I followed the sound deeper, one hand tight on the guideline, my light cutting across jagged stone. Every time I turned, the wall seemed closer than before. The water pressed harder. The air in my tank felt heavier, thicker. The chamber opened again, a long, low slope that dipped into shadow. My beam caught something floating halfway down. At first I thought it was debris, maybe an old wetsuit or a pack that had come loose. But as I drifted closer, the shape didn't move with the current. It hung there, still. When my light touched it, the water flashed pale. A body. He was wedged in a narrow fissure, half his torso twisted into the rock. The sight hit me so suddenly that my breath caught. For a few seconds, I couldn't even move. His limbs floated in slow motion, one arm bent backward at a wrong angle, fingers grazing the limestone like he'd been reaching for something that wasn't there. The mask was flooded, the eyes behind it clouded white. His lips were pulled back over his teeth mouth, frozen in a silent scream. I'd seen drowning before, panic terror, all the ways people claw at life before it leaves them. But this was different. It wasn't fear on his face. It was pain. The suit was shredded. Long, clean gashes tore through the neoprene, slicing deep into the flesh underneath. The visor was cracked in 3 places, as if something had dragged across it, slowly, deliberately. For a moment, I told myself, it could have been rockfall. Maybe he got pinned, maybe the current tore him. Anything to explain it. But I'd been in enough caves to know limestone doesn't carve wounds like that. My comms crackled. Harris's voice cut through, muted by static. You have visual. Yeah, I said, forcing the words out. One of them. He's gone. Secure what you can. Harris replied, his tone cold and professional. Mark the location. Move on. Survivors first. I hated that phrase, survivors first. It always sounded like admitting defeat. I unclipped a body bag from my harness and worked the diver free. It took longer than it should have. His body was swollen, the limbs stiff. When I pulled the skin around his gloves, came loose, sloughing off like wet paper. The whole time I could feel it, the water around me, shifting, moving in slow, deliberate waves that didn't match my own motions. When I finally zipped the bag and let it drift behind me, something tugged at my fin. Hard. I spun light, sweeping the dark. Nothing. Just the flicker of Leon's lamp in the distance. "Leon," I said, "you touched me just now." "No." His voice came through shaky. "Still at the junction." "Why?" My chest tightened. I stared into the dark half, expecting to see movement, a shadow, a ripple, anything. But there was only stillness. Then the knocking started again. Closer this time. Knock, knock, knock. Each beat vibrated through the water, faint but rhythmic, echoing up through my bones. I turned my light towards the fissure the body had come from. The darkness inside it looked different now, thicker, like it had depth that shouldn't exist. Something about it pulled at me. I couldn't explain why. It wasn't curiosity. It was the opposite. It was like the cave itself wanted me to look to see what was inside. And for one terrible second, I thought I saw something looking back. A pale curve, a hint of motion, and then nothing. The light got only a rock again. I didn't move for a long time, just hovered there, heart pounding the guideline taut in my fist. Finally, I forced myself to turn away and start moving. But as I did, I felt the water shift one last time, like a breath against my back. Slow, deep, inhale, and somewhere in that silence, I realized something I still can't explain. The knocking wasn't echoing through the cave. It was answering me. The knocking faded as I moved deeper. For the first time in what felt like hours, there was silence again, just the rhythmic hiss of my regulator and the dull echo of my heartbeat against the stone. The passage narrowed into another vertical shaft, and I followed the line upward. My light caught the glimmer of trapped air above tiny bubbles crawling up the walls. I surfaced slowly into a small pocket of foul-smelling air. The chamber was tight, just enough space for one person to breathe. The stench hit me first. Stale metallic sour. It reeked of decay and stagnant water. I tilted my light upward and caught a flash of movement, a ripple against the rock. I froze. For a second, I thought the reflection was just condensation, the kind that dances when your light shifts. But then it pulsed. A slow exhale fogged the wall in front of me, fading just as quickly. Someone had breathed here. Recently. I swallowed hard and spoke through my mask voice, cracking in the calm. "Hello, this is Rescue. Can you hear me?" The echo came back, distorted, warped by the narrow walls. Nothing else. Then, from the dark corner of the bubble, came a sound I'll never forget. Breathing. Not mine. Not the steady rhythm of the tank. It was uneven, wet, trembling human. I turned my light toward the noise, sweeping the beam over slick rock and still water. The glow landed on a face, pale, half-submerged, eyes open. For a heartbeat, I thought it was another corpse. But then, the eyes blinked. I lunged forward, breaking the surface beside him. The man was wedged on a narrow ledge, his body shivering uncontrollably. His mask was gone, lips blue, skin gray. His nails were torn fingers, bleeding from clawing at the rock. Hey, it's okay," I said, grabbing his harness. "You're safe. We're getting you out." He flinched at my touch, pressing himself back against the stone. His teeth chattered, and when he spoke, his voice came out in a rasping whisper. It followed us in. I blinked through the fog on my mask. Wanted he shook his head violently, eyes rolling white. "It doesn't let go. You can't take it out. You can't..." His words dissolved into choking gasps. I tried to steady him, to pull the spare regulator from my pack. "You're in shock. Breathe." "We'll talk later." But he wasn't listening. He kept staring past me at the water behind my shoulder. His face twisted into something primal, the kind of terror you only see in people who've already accepted they're dead. "Don't bring it out," he hissed. "Don't bring it back." I wanted to ask what he meant, but the way he said it made my blood run cold. Not him. Not them. It. Something moved below us, a ripple that brushed against my legs. The man's eyes went wide. He started thrashing, screaming, trying to climb higher up the slick stone. "Stop!" I yelled, grabbing his arm. "You'll slip." He didn't stop. I forced the regulator into his mouth and tightened the strap. His hands clawed weakly at me, then dropped. The fight drained from him all at once, replaced by a trembling resignation. When he finally nodded, I pulled him back into the water, one arm locked around his chest, guiding him toward the descent. He shook the entire way down, every muscle twitching like he was fighting something invisible. The guideline hummed faintly under my glove. I kept my light trained ahead, refusing to look behind us. Every instinct screamed that we weren't alone. We moved slowly, inch by inch, through the black corridor. My breathing was steady. His wasn't. The hiss of his regulator came in sharp bursts, short, panicked gasps. Then I felt it again. A touch, a glide of pressure against my side. Smooth, cold. Moving the opposite direction we were. I froze light, darting across the tunnel. Nothing. Just silt, swirling in the current. The man thrashed suddenly muffled screams bubbling from his mouthpiece. I tightened my grip, forcing him forward. "Keep breathing. We're almost out." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. There was something in that water with us. It wasn't the cave shifting. It wasn't current. It was something alive. And it was following us. The water around us grew heavier. Each movement felt like dragging through syrup. My light flickered once, then steadied. But something in the blackness beyond it shifted a subtle distortion, as if the cave itself were stirring. The survivor clung to my arm, trembling so violently that his regulator rattled in his teeth. His eyes darted from side to side, searching the dark for something he didn't want to see. I squeezed his harness and pulled him forward. "Stay with me," I said, my voice hollow through the comms. He shook his head weakly. "It's here," he rasped. The guideline stretched ahead of us like a lifeline. I forced us onward, one kick at a time. The silence pressed down harder until I could hear nothing but my own heartbeat. And beneath it another sound, a low rhythmic pulse. Knock, knock, knock. It came from behind. The survivor froze bubbles exploding from his mouthpiece. I turned, sweeping the light through the murk. Nothing, just drifting silt, shimmering like dust. Then something moved, a shape gliding along the wall. Pale, smooth, long. My light caught it for half a heartbeat, a limb maybe, or something pretending to be one. Then it was gone, disappearing into the cloud of sediment. The survivor screamed. The sound was muffled, warped by the water, but it tore through me like a knife. He kicked free, thrashing wildly, his hand clawing at my mask. "Stop!" I shouted, but it came out as a garbled mess. I lunged for him, grabbing his harness just as a shadow streaked past beneath us. The current shifted, dragging the silt upward in a violent whirl. Visibility vanished. The water filled with brown and red, and I lost sight of everything, the line, the walls, the survivor. All I could do was feel. A brush against my leg, then another across my back. Not rough, not sharp, soft, like the touch of skin. The survivor's weight jerked suddenly in my hand. His body convulsed, then went limp. I yanked him toward me, fingers slipping on the slick nylon. My light flickered again, and in the brief flash that followed, I saw it. A curve of pale flesh, almost translucent, gliding along the edge of the light beam. It moved like smoke underwater, slow, deliberate, and wrong. I couldn't see where it began or ended. Just a sense of size, vast, too big for the tunnel. Then the knocking came again, deafening this time. Not from behind, not from ahead, from everywhere. The cave itself was shaking with it. Knock, knock, knock. The survivor twitched, once blood bursting in a dark bloom from the corner of his mask. His body was yanked sideways out of my grip, disappearing into the black. I kicked after him, screaming his name, but the current slammed me into the wall. My light shattered against the rock, plunging me into total darkness. I grabbed the guideline with both hands, clinging to it as the world roared around me. The water wasn't just moving, it was breathing, expanding and contracting like lungs the size of mountains. I felt the pull again, deep and hungry, dragging at my fins, my tank, my mind. And just when I thought it would swallow me too, it stopped. Silence. The pressure eased, the current stilled. When I finally got my back up, light on the water was calm again. No survivor, no shadow, just the faint shimmer of blood drifting through the beam, dissolving into nothing. I was alone. Leon's voice broke through the static in my comms, trembling. "Where the hell are you? Harris says your signal's going crazy." I swallowed hard. "There's something down here." "What do you mean?" I looked at the empty water, at the red fading into black. I couldn't bring myself to answer. All I said was, "We need to leave." Leon's signal blinked faintly on my wrist display. Close, but not close enough. I followed the line upward, trying to steady my breathing. My backup light trembled in my grip, its narrow beam slicing through the murk. The water had gone thick, clouded with drifting sediment. Then I saw it. A faint shimmer in the distance, just enough to catch the edge of movement. For one wild second, I thought it was the survivor, maybe still alive, maybe trying to swim back toward me. But when the light hit him fully, my gut turned to ice. It wasn't the survivor. It was Leon. He hung in the water like a puppet limp, one arm twisted at a strange angle. His mask was half flooded, his mouth slack, his eyes open and empty. His suit was shredded, deep gouges torn across his chest and arms. And through those wounds, something dark bled into the water, slow and deliberate. Blood. It spread in ribbons, curling like smoke through the beam of my light. The sight froze me in place. I'd been doing this long enough to recognize every type of death a diver could face: entrapment, panic, drowning. But this wasn't any of those. This was violence. "Leon," I whispered into the comms, though I knew he couldn't hear me. Something stirred behind him. A tremor rippled through the cloud of red. I lifted my light and caught only a flicker pale flesh, vanishing into the dark. Then came the knocking. Knock, knock, knock. It rolled through the chamber like thunder underwater, shaking the silt loose from the ceiling. I could feel it in my ribs, my teeth, my spine. Every beat felt heavier than the last, closer, louder, like the sound wasn't echoing, but breathing. The blood cloud thickened, the light dimmed until I could barely see the line anymore. I reached for it blindly, my glove brushing the rope, just as something brushed me back. It slid across my arm, smooth, heavy, cold. I kicked hard, pulling away, hand clamped on the line. The water churned. My light caught another glimpse of Leon's body, twisting in the current, his arm jerking. as if something below had yanked it. The motion sent a plume of blood spiraling upward, painting the cave in red haze. That's when I saw it just for a moment. A shape in the dark. Massive, pale, not quite animal, not quite human. The curve of a shoulder. The suggestion of a face that wasn't a face at all, just smooth, featureless flesh stretched over bone. It moved without sound, gliding through the crimson fog like it owned the water. And then it was gone. I didn't stop to think. I kicked upward hard, following the line toward the faint shimmer of light above. The current resisted, as if something enormous was breathing me back in. I didn't look down again. I couldn't. By the time I reached the next air pocket, the blood had followed me. It drifted through the water like a living thing rising from below, painting everything in shades of rust. I pulled myself up onto a ledge and tore the mask from my face, gasping air that tasted like rot. My hands were shaking too hard to hold the light steady. The water below still pulsed with movement, the red clouds swirling, expanding, fading into the dark. And in that moment, I understood what the survivor had meant. You can't bring it out, because whatever was in that cave, it wasn't just alive. It was hungry. The silence after the attack was unbearable. No comms, no heartbeat but my own. Just the soft hiss of air leaving my tank and the faint crackle of something shifting below the surface. I kept my back pressed against the rock, trying not to make a sound. My hands trembled as I checked my gauge oxygen low, too low. I didn't have long. The water below me still moved barely. Every few seconds, a ripple broke the surface too smooth to be current, too precise to be random. It was breathing again. Inhale, exhale. Each pulse drew the water in, then released it like the entire cave was alive around me. I couldn't stay. Not another minute. I slipped the regulator back into my mouth and lowered myself into the water. My light trembled, catching swirls of red, still drifting in the current. Leon's blood. The survivors. It didn't matter anymore. I just had to move. I found the guideline again, thin taut, cutting through the dark like a whisper of safety. I followed it, hand over hand, every inch feeling like a mile. The water pressed in tighter the farther I went. The sound of my breathing was too loud, like the cave was listening. My chest ached from holding panic down, but the thought of letting go was worse. I glanced back once. The blood cloud hung there, suspended, slowly twisting. Beneath it, something moved. A pale curved shape that didn't belong to any world I knew. It slid upward, too big to fit the tunnel. Yet somehow it did, like the rock bent around it. My light flickered. For a heartbeat, the reflection in my mask wasn't my own. Something smooth and white stared back, its face pressed against the inside of the glass, impossibly close. I jerked back, hard hammering the regulator, nearly slipping from my mouth. Then it was gone. I kicked hard, scraping my knees against the stone. The tunnel angled up ahead, an escape route, or maybe just another dead end. I didn't care. I climbed. My lungs screamed for air, my vision blurred. The guideline cut into my glove where I gripped it too tight. Then through the darkness, I saw it light. A faint shimmer of daylight filtering down through the surface layer. The exit. I kicked faster, ignoring the burning in my legs, ignoring the way the water seemed to fight me now, pulling back, like hands clutching at my ankles. Don't bring it out. The words echoed in my head, the survivor's voice, rising above the pounding in my ears. I wanted to believe it was just fear, just the cave playing tricks on me. But as I rose, the current shifted. The water around me sucked downward, pulling with impossible force, dragging me toward the dark. I screamed bubbles, exploding from my mouthpiece. My hand clamped tighter on the line. The pull grew stronger. Something brushed my back, curling around me, smooth and heavy. The light above dimmed, fading behind the swirl of silt and blood. I kicked once, twice the muscles in my legs, tearing with effort. My glove slipped halfway off the line, then caught. I yanked forward, with everything I had, one final push toward the fading light. And then, suddenly, the pressure vanished. I shot upward, bursting through the surface with a ragged gasp. The cold air sliced into my lungs like knives. For a moment, I just floated there, weightless, staring up at the narrow slit of sky above the cave mouth. The silence returned. Behind me, deep below, I felt it the slow, rhythmic shift of water. Inhale, exhale. The cave was still breathing, and somewhere inside it, something was still awake. When I surfaced, the world felt wrong. The air was too bright, too loud, too alive. My ears rang with the silence that followed a hollow buzzing that wouldn't fade. For a long time, I just floated there, staring at the lip of the cave above, half expecting the water to heave again, to see something rise after me. But it didn't. It just breathed, slowly, deeply. The rangers were waiting when I finally dragged myself out. Floodlights burned through the fog, and their faces turned as one when they saw me. No one spoke. No one asked about the others. They didn't have to. My body was shaking too hard to answer questions anyway. Someone took my tank, another my mask. The metal hissed as they set it down, the echo rolling through the rock like a whisper. Hours passed in a blur. There was a debrief, a medic's tent, a clipboard, full of questions I couldn't answer. They wanted data oxygen levels, pressure depth. They wanted facts. But how do you write down? Something like it was breathing. They found Leon's transmitter signal half a mile inside the system. His body was never recovered. Same with Harris. The cave shifted again that night, sealing most of the tunnels. By morning, the whole entrance was under 6 feet of water. Officially, they called it a collapse. Unofficially, they told us not to talk. I signed the reports because what else could I do? I left out the knocks, the breathing, the pale thing moving in the blood. I left out the voice on the radio whispering that it was still there. It was easier to lie, easier to pretend it was just another failed rescue. But the lie didn't last long. 3 weeks later, I was called back to the base for a follow-up. Standard procedure, they said. When I got there, one of the rangers pulled me aside. He didn't say much, just that the water level had dropped. The sonar was picking up movement again, pressure waves, slow, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound followed me, hollow, distant, echoing inside my skull. I kept hearing it between breaths, under the hum of the heater, in the pulse of the pipes. Knock, knock, knock. Sometimes, when it's quiet, I still hear it. It's faint, like something deep underground, just beneath the edge of hearing. I don't dive anymore. I haven't since that night. I tell people it's my back or my lungs or that I've had enough close calls. But the truth is simpler. Because when I close my eyes, I can still see that red cloud blooming in the dark, and I can still feel the water shift around me, slow, deliberate, alive. I think about the warning the survivor gave me. Don't bring it out with you. I used to believe he meant the creature. Now I'm not so sure. Because sometimes, when I wake in the middle of the night, I can hear my house breathing. And I can't tell if it's me or the cave. Some caves echo forever. Some never let go. If what he said is true, maybe the cave still breathes, waiting for the next sound to answer. If you ever hear knocking, don't knock back. You've been listening to NightLore, where true fear lives in the spaces between breaths. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing. And remember, sometimes silence is just something waiting to exhale.